So here's my story of the Fuji X-T3 along with the answer later on if I will actually keep it or not. Because here it's where it starts. 9 days ago I bought the Fuji X-T3 with the kit lens for 1700 euros. Usually it's 1900, I got a little bit off due to some coupon codes that I had. But this, no matter what, is just way more than I ever spent on a camera. Usually, for example, I paid like 500 for my Sony a6000 with the kit lens, about the same for my Panasonic G7. And with all those lenses combined that I bought until now, it's still less than I paid for this one. And that's also the main reason why I use this camera way more than any other camera in that time frame. Just because I needed to know for myself if it is worth buying this to make the switch from 1080p 60, what I've used before, to finally get to 4K 60. So I'm definitely completely gonna focus only on video and only for tech use to make my reviews. And obviously, if you have ever seen my reviews, those are definitely not relying on any sorts of cinematic things or anything like that. And this camera definitely for me is already overkill because of how kind of boring my videos look. But I've said this so many times before, what I need for a camera and why I need such a good camera just depends on my personal preference, because I wanted to switch to 4K, so I wanted better quality, and I definitely wanted something that makes it way more easy or easier to use it, because on my Panasonic G7 every time I needed to use the app for the iPad or for a phone to get the manual focus running, because autofocus isn't a thing. So this camera might make a lot of things easier for me, just because, for example, as you can see, the autofocus actually works, and it works really well. By the way, this is the footage in 4K 60 of the Fuji X-T3. So I have some main categories and I have some pros and cons, but before I'm actually gonna get into this, I have to just mention one thing. I am the nitpicker for a good reason, and therefore actually my con list in all categories is way bigger than my pro list, which does not necessarily mean that it's a bad cam. Those are kind of personal issues that I have, but even though those might sound overall just like a lot, it doesn't have to mean that it has an impact on you, and it doesn't even mean that it has a big enough impact for me not to keep it. So let's start off with the first thing. The first pro when it comes to the body and in general is many buttons and dials, which is very customizable and therefore very flexible to use, because I can pretty much set up everything just through dials, where on some other cams that I've used before I still had to use the software or the menus a lot. This you can pretty much solely adjust everything just based on the extra functions buttons and on the dials, which makes it easier for me because I can actually change a lot of things blindly when I use this camera to record my devices up top, so I don't even see the device. So that's one handy thing. The next thing is very easy access to the dual SD card slot. I mean, it's cool that we have dual SD card slot, even though I pretty much never will use either one of these, since I mostly record here in my studio and I record through an HDMI capture card, which is what you're looking actually at by now. But it's still cool that I can easily from the side access it and both. And the same thing also actually goes for the battery, because I can still access my battery even if I have the quick release plate on. So that's an easy thing for me. Then many ports and the cap can be actually taken off, which is quite a good thing, because for example I use the USB-C port and I use the HDMI port, and in some cases you will use the microphone port or the headphone jack, and then it's easy if you have no flap lying around. Like for example on so many other cameras, especially Sony cameras are known for that they're always in the way, so that is not an issue. And then as a general pro is that we get a quite, I would say, good entry-level price for about 1500 just for the body, and usually like 1800 for the kit lens, for a very good kit lens, I have to mention also in that regard. And for if someone has the question, is the kit, and I know because techtablets.com for example, is the kit lens on its own good enough to be used as my only lens? And I would say definitely yes, because all what I did with it, because I tried to get to the maximum of this kit lens for all possible scenarios, like for example also recording speaker reviews and such. The 18 to 55 is flexible enough from a range perspective, and 2.8 to 4 also is quite good. For example, for my use, when I use it for up down to record phones and such, I am stuck at around 3.6 to 4, so I'm already pretty much at the end, so I need a little bit higher of an ISO. That's why I will personally go for a 2.0 lens, but it would be totally enough, because if you, for example, check my preview of the Vivo Nex 2, that one I solely used the cam for, and I get an absolutely totally rough enough picture, because he, for example, had the issue that he had to swap lenses all the time to get certain shots. But with 18 to 55, I think you are definitely more than flexible enough in all situations. And then can still have a good enough picture quality. So I would not really need an extra lens. But since, for example, if I want to use a second one to record me like this, I would wish for a little bit more bokeh, or also for the devices. That's pretty much the only reason why I would go for a 2.0 lens. So let's get to the cons. The grip of the camera is a little bit small. I just have to say that. I mean, if I would use it a lot on the go, also for photos and so on, I think actually that the grip is a little bit too small. Then maybe where the extra battery grip might come in handy. The next thing is USB Type-C, and that's a big issue actually for me. That will also be a later part for the main pros and cons. The USB-C port does charge the battery, which is nice to see, but what pretty much no one else in reviews told, I think only one person mentioned it, it does not charge while in use. And that's the biggest bummer for me, which means if I want to make a live stream, or if I want to record the videos that I usually do, which takes more than an hour, which is what the battery pretty much holds up for, I can't use this, I can't charge it, and then I need a coupler. So, and pretty much an external device that with a dummy battery just gives the camera power. That is a big issue for me, because this means extra costs. Not that much, I mean like $20, but still. Then I can't use the internal battery because I have the dummy battery, so quite a big bummer. So a coupler is needed for long-time use, like for example live streams, or if you want to use it just longer at a time. Because if I would think about that, if I'm on the go and the battery holds me for an hour in most situations, that is fine. I swap batteries. But for me, who always uses one long take, it's a little bit of an issue, because I've already made 1 hour long videos, which I wouldn't be able to do with this, especially without any extra batteries, which is the next thing. The lenses. Fuji lenses, especially the entry level, aren't all that cheap, because when I've checked, for example, the 2.0 lenses, there is, for example, the 23, the 50mm and the 35mm. I personally would have to opt for the 35. That's the sweet spot, what I would actually be able to cover, along with the kit lens in some situations, all my needs. And especially in Europe, it's 450 euros, 480 maybe for the 50mm, which is still quite expensive. If I think I paid like maybe 200 for my Sony or for my Panasonic lenses, so it's twice the price. Maybe the quality is a little bit better. I heard these are supposed to be very good lenses, but still quite expensive. Now in the US, for example, I would save 33% if I buy the lenses there. And it would be even, that's the hardest part, it would be even cheaper to import it from the US with all the additional taxes than buying it here straight up. That's the thing. But therefore the camera, the lenses seem to be very good. And the next thing is actually that higher end lenses like the 1.4 alternatives aren't actually that appealing, especially for videos. I'm only talking about videos, because there I saw a very good comparison between the 1.2 and the 2.0 lenses. There was also a 1.2 lens on the 56mm side, but autofocus was noticeably slower, between 23 and 70%. Which isn't maybe that crucial of a thing, because the autofocus is really good on this camera. I mean, you can see that if I just hold up my hand and I didn't even set up things, as you can see, this works top. And there is no kind of jumpiness, kind of pumping going on, which is a big thing for me. But those 1.4 lenses had a very loud autofocus. And I mean, it's already audible on this one. If you would use only the internal microphone, it would actually pick up the autofocus quite a lot. So that's not really an option. So if you want to use the 1.4 lens, it's definitely for photography. For video, I would stick with 2.0 lenses anytime. And then the kit lens, like I said, is audible, and you will need external audio. Let's get to the next thing, menus and software. Pros, tons of settings, granular fine control, and especially what I like here is how easy it is to set up white balance and actually adjust it in very small steps, so you can get pretty much the white balance that you want. This one for me seems quite good. Okay. Then I have to say that there is a settings overkill, but due to the My Menu option, where you can just take the settings items that you need, or the menu items, and put it into a My Menu system, it makes it way easier to get kinda okay with the overkill of settings, because you have so many options. Fine and granular ones, but so many, and it's not all that easy sometimes to keep track of where they are and to get actually to them. Then what I personally like is that we have separate photo and video controls, even though I personally don't even use the photo side and I will barely ever do any photos with that. But it's nice to see that if you switch from photo to video, and if you have the right settings control, you don't even have to change between these. Because whenever I did this with my Panasonic G7, every time I had to adjust pretty much all the settings to get my photos done. So that's actually quite a big plus. Then on the con side, menu navigation is very inconvenient, because the issue that I had with it, for example, if you go to video, settings. You have 5 pages, but you can't just go straight up from page 1 to page 5. You have to go all the way to 1, 2, 3 to access 5. If there is a solution, then I don't get it, because the way you access those, you get either to the left side, and then you have the main categories like photos, settings, user settings, and so on, and then video, my menu. And if you go to the right side, you have to go from 1 to 5 or how many pages it has. That's an inconvenient way. I would have liked to just be able to skip from 1 to 5 directly. That's just one thing, especially if you have so many pages, it would have been a big thing. Then all those menus and all those options and settings are quite overwhelming for newbies. I just have to admit that that's just something that I can't leave out of the equation. And some menu items especially aren't even properly explained, because I set up so many dials just to notice that whenever I actually use them, nothing really happens, because it either happens maybe only in photo mode, but not even isn't used in video mode, which makes it harder to get used to. But if you set it up once, then you should be fine. But for a beginner, especially into the Fuji realm, it's not that easy. I have to just say that, because I definitely haven't fully figured out things yet. Then 4 GB split files. So it splits up the video every 4 GB. That's supposed to be fixed in the next update. The 2.0 update didn't bring it just yet. I've read that it's supposed to come in January. One big file definitely makes it easier to edit. Not a big issue for me, since I don't really use those files anyways. So that's that. And then HDMI does not work with my Elgato 4K 60 Pro. That was a huge bummer, because I bought this card like half a year ago in order to be future-proof for the 4K camera that I'm gonna buy. And well, it does not work with that. I mean, I've heard that also some external recorders don't work with the Fuji for some reason. Maybe they use a different kind of HDMI protocol. But I have to say, at least on the good side, the cheaper and actually better 4K capture card on the PC side, the AverMedia LiveGamer 4K, does work with it, and I paid only $260 for it instead of $400. So it's cheaper, and it actually works better because you don't have any driver issues. Then real quick, audio. The preamps aren't really that good, because especially with the lav mic that I've used, there was just too much hiss. If you use a higher quality mic, it might work out well, but you definitely need an external microphone, that's for sure. But you have at least a plugin, and you can use it in case you need it. Then let's get already to the main pros and main cons, and then I will tell you if I will keep it and why not. Okay, the main pros, 4K 60. That's the main reason. I was waiting for a 4K 60 card with full HDMI support, so I can use this with my videos. For example, an alternative for me was never the GH5, because the autofocus is atrocious, but the G9 actually was. The G9 fell out of the game just because it doesn't, even though it supports 4K 60, it doesn't put that out over HDMI. And with HDMI, obviously, we get 422, 10-bit and so on, which is something that I don't really care so much about it. But it's nice to have. Then, very good overall body with a lot of dials, functions, which makes the use without menus actually quite easy. A very good starting value at around 1500 for a cam that offers so much, it's great. And a very good kit lens. So once you get used to how it works, it's actually quite convenient to use. Now, let's get to the cons, and I will actually also, every time when I mention one, let you know if that's actually a crucial thing maybe for you. Okay, so the big thing for me, like I said, no USB charging while in use. A coupler is needed. I mean, the coupler only costed me $20, so it's not the end of the world, but I can't then use it when it's not plugged in. Then I have to switch out the battery, but that's just one thing. Then menu navigation, like I already said, it's a little bit inconvenient to get used to, but yeah, man, it's fine. Then quite expensive lens at the entry level. We've talked about that. Very poor battery life. This is actually something that I didn't even mention because I'm doing it right now. 1 hour and 10. 4K 60, and that's just through the HDMI output. I'm not even internal recording. When I did 4K 60 internally with 200 Mbits, the battery holded maybe up for about 40 minutes. So if you maybe go down to 4K 30 or do anything else, maybe look at 45 minutes, at best 50 minutes, but that's not good enough. If I consider that this can record up to 2 hours, at least through the HDMI. If I record, it's a little bit less, but from 2 hours to 2 hours and 10, that's quite a big difference. So in most cases, you will need the battery grip, which actually also gets me to the next thing. It can't pretty much be avoided to get into extra costs, additional costs. Like for example, the battery grip, if you want just to record longer at a time without having to replace batteries all the time, then you definitely need an extra audio solution, but that's usually something that you would need anyways. And then the coupler is needed for long time use. If you use the battery grip, actually you can't avoid this because the battery grip has AC input and that charges the batteries even in use. but I don't really need that, so you can avoid that. And usually you get it in a bundle for like 150 extra bucks for the battery grip. Batteries I paid, for example, I bought 2 with a charger for about 30 bucks, a little bit over 35 bucks. So use either one. Either use the battery grip and then you can charge, or you buy the coupler. But I simply was rather paying 30 bucks for the coupler than 150 plus the batteries to get that done. So which are the things that actually don't even have to bother you? The USB charging thing, that's something that you have to know. Get the coupler or get the battery grip and you are fine. Menu navigation, you will get used to that, and after a while it's fine. Quite expensive lenses. I mean, at least those seem to be very good and cover base rate. What I've noticed that the more expensive lenses actually don't seem that appealing for me unless they maybe get super expensive. Very poor battery life, that's definitely something that you have to live with, and the additional costs are just a thing. So, let's wrap this up. Will I keep it or not? Well, based on the pros and cons that you have seen and have seen me complain, it definitely looks like I will return it, but the reason is why I'm actually gonna keep it after all is that there is, first of all, no real alternative at the moment right now. There is nothing that records 4K 60 and puts that out through HDMI, because I need that personally. Since I record everything through my capture card, 4K 60 is what I wanted. This is pretty much the only option, maybe besides the GH5, that is not a thing, because it's actually even more expensive. And yeah, autofocus, we don't even have to talk about that, because this camera overall, even though it has some downsides, actually has some things that I haven't even talked at all about, which is the quality. I mean, if I compare this footage with the footage that I had of the Sony a7R III, it doesn't look quite as spectacular, but I also have to consider that the a7R III costed about 3,500 euros instead of 1,500 here, and the lenses that I used back then were 1,500 and 2,000, so a way more expensive setup. And if I then consider this with 4K 60, which the Sony didn't even have, I get actually quite close to the camera. I get an even better autofocus because that one was unusable due to the pump. Quality is brilliant. I like the color science here. I like the ease of use, and everything that's important for me, for my type of style, actually I can get around the few issues with. For example, like I said, the USB charging, I'm buying a coupler, then this thing is solved. The low battery life, if I may be on events like on CES, I bought 2 extra batteries, I'm done with that. And then I will buy the 35mm f.2, which pretty much covers me along with the kit lens. I mean, like I said, I wouldn't need it, but it definitely helps me. So even though the cons outweigh the weight of those cons, actually, if you kinda can get around with it with a few walkarounds, then definitely the pros overweigh, because 4K 60, great video quality, amazing autofocus, it works super nice, even though sometimes audible on the videos, it's easy to use, it's still the cheapest 4K 60 option of all those few options. And if, and this is a big if now, if the next Sony, the a7000, whatever it will be, won't be really that much better and not much more expensive, I will actually buy a second Fuji X-T3, because I want 2 cameras, so it's easy for me to have 4K 60 in all places. Because for right now I have to switch the camera all the time unless I use one camera for 1080p, but I want the full quality by now because I got so spoiled after a few days already by it. So the Sony has to deliver something. If it's maybe a little bit more expensive, but gives me 4K 60 with the pros of not needing a coupler because it supports USB Type-C, and if it maybe even supports my Elgato, which the a7R III did, then I would actually save money, especially since I could use my old lenses as well. But if that doesn't turn out to be the thing, then I'm totally selling my whole Sony lineup and then going full in once again in a second Fuji. That's how good it is after all. And I mean, I don't have to get into the fact that it won so many prizes like best aps-c lens, sometimes even best overall, best aps-c camera, sometimes even best overall camera, especially for the price. I mean, getting that much for this price at this quality, even though I have to say it doesn't completely wow me, I, for example, expected something even more impressive. It totally is on a high level, and I'm definitely not the person with the skills to actually take full advantage of it. I know so many more people will actually use this to its full strengths and then get an even better experience out of that. But that's where it stands from my standpoint, and I hope this was still helpful. And it was definitely already way too long. Even though I wanted to keep it shorter, it's just not the thing. Okay, until next time, bye.